The film begins with a hauntingly whimsical score by Thomas Newman, accompanied by a series of animated opening credits that set the tone for the story. The narrator, Lemony Snicket, introduces himself as a man who has spent years researching the tragic tale of the Baudelaire children. He warns that this is not a happy story but rather a series of unfortunate events, filled with misery, despair, and danger. We then meet Violet, the eldest of the siblings, shown inventing a contraption by the lake, demonstrating her intelligence and creativity. Klaus, the middle child, is seen reading a book by the lake, highlighting his love for knowledge and research. Sunny, the baby, shown biting a wooden plank with her sharp teeth, showcasing her unique ability. The children are portrayed as happy, curious, and close-knit, enjoying their privileged life in a grand mansion. The peaceful scene is abruptly interrupted when the children are approached by a man named Mr. Poe. He tells them that their parents have died in a fire that broke out in the Baudelaire mansion. The children are rushed to see the ruins left behind and are visibly distraught by what they are witnessing, leaving them orphaned. The children are taken to the bank by Mr. Poe, a family friend and executor of their parents' estate. Mr. Poe is a well-meaning but clueless and overly formal man, constantly coughing due to a respiratory condition. He explains to the children that their parents will states they must be placed in the care of a relative. Despite the children's protests and attempts to explain their fears, Mr. Poe remains oblivious to their emotional state and insists on following the legal process. Mr. Poe takes the children to their new guardian, Count Olaf, who is revealed to be their closest living relative. Along the way, the children express their concerns, but Mr. Poe dismisses them, assuring the Baudelaire that everything will be fine. Count Olaf makes his grand entrance, descending a staircase with theatrical flair. He is introduced as a flamboyant, grotesque, and sinister figure, dressed in a tattered robe and wearing a tattoo of the same symbol seen earlier. Olaf's exaggerated mannerisms and dark humor immediately set him apart as a villain. He greets the children with false warmth, but his true intentions are evident in his dismissive and cruel behavior. The children are shown to their new room, which is actually a cramped and filthy space with a single bed and a window overlooking a brick wall. Olaf makes it clear that he has no interest in their well-being, treating them as servants rather than family. He assigns them a series of menial and absurd tasks, such as cooking dinner for his troupe of associates and cleaning the house. Olaf's troupe are introduced as a group of odd and suspicious characters, including a hook-handed man, a bald henchman and two women who seem equally untrustworthy. The children quickly realize that they are in a dangerous situation, but their attempts to try and call Mr. Poe falls on deaf ears. The next day, Count Olaf takes the Baudelaire orphans on what appears to be an ordinary errand. However, as the children soon discover, nothing is ever ordinary when Count Olaf is involved. They find themselves in a perilous situation as Olaf parks the car directly on a set of train tracks and locks the doors, leaving them trapped inside while he enters a nearby store. The children, realizing the danger they are in, begin to panic as they hear the distant rumble of an approaching train. Count Olaf, ever the schemer, deliberately stalls inside the store, hoping the train will collide with the car and eliminate the Baudelaire, allowing him to claim their vast inheritance. The Baudelaire, however, are not so easily defeated. Despite their fear, they quickly assess their situation and devise a plan. Using their resourcefulness and teamwork, they tear apart the car's sofa and fashion it into a makeshift rope. With remarkable precision, they throw the rope toward the railroad switch, aiming to divert the train's path. Miraculously, their aim is true, and they manage to pull the switch just in time, redirecting the train and saving their lives. Shortly after this harrowing ordeal, Mr. Poe arrives on the scene. Count Olaf, ever the actor, quickly unlocks the car doors and feigns concern for the children, even going so far as to use eye drops to simulate tears. Mr. Poe, shocked to see Sunny in the driver's seat, finally begins to question Olaf's suitability as a guardian. He decides to remove the children from Olaf's care, much to Olaf's frustration. Before they leave, Olaf delivers a chilling warning, vowing that he will one day claim the Baudelaire fortune, no matter what it takes. The children, though relieved to be away from Olaf, are left with a lingering sense of dread, knowing that their troubles are far from over. Mr. Poe takes the Baudelaire to their next potential guardian, Dr. Montgomery, affectionately known as Uncle Monty. Uncle Monty is a kind and eccentric herpetologist who lives in a house filled with exotic animals, a stark contrast to the grim and oppressive environment of Count Olaf's home. The children are immediately struck by Uncle Monty's warmth and enthusiasm. He welcomes them with open arms and shares his passion for reptiles, showing them his collection of fascinating creatures, including a deadly viper. Despite its fearsome reputation, Uncle Monty assures the children that the viper is harmless, a detail that will later prove significant. Uncle Monty's home quickly becomes a sanctuary for the Baudelaire. He treats them with kindness and respect, encouraging their curiosity and love of learning. He even reveals his plans to take them on an expedition to Peru, an exciting prospect that fills the children with hope for the future. One evening, after a delightful dinner, Uncle Monty plays a song on the violin that resonates deeply with the children. Violet tells him that their parents used to play the same song for them. Uncle Monty, moved by this connection, opens up about his own tragic past, revealing that he, too, had a family once, but they perished in a fire. This shared experience of loss deepens the bond between Uncle Monty and the Baudelaires, giving them a sense of kinship and understanding. However, this newfound peace is short-lived. A few weeks later, the children hear a knock at the door and are horrified to find Count Olaf standing on the doorstep, disguised as a man named Stefano. Despite their protests, Uncle Monty, unaware of Olaf's true identity, welcomes him into the house, believing him to be a fellow scientist who will assist with his research. The Baudelaires are desperate to warn Uncle Monty, but he dismisses their concerns, insisting that they help bring Stefano's bags inside. As they do so, the children notice something suspicious about Stefano's behavior and decide to take matters into their own hands. They write a warning on one of Uncle Monty's snakes, hoping to alert him to Stefano's true intentions. Uncle Monty, intrigued by the children's message, decides to test Stefano's knowledge of reptiles. He asks Stefano to identify the gender of one of his snakes, a task that should be simple for a fellow zoologist. Stefano, visibly uncomfortable and out of his depth, fumbles for an answer, claiming that his eyesight is not what it used to be. This blatant lack of expertise confirms Uncle Monty's suspicions, and he begins to believe the children's warnings. Before they can devise a plan to expose Stefano, however, he suggests that the children go to bed, as it is getting late. Uncle Monty, still trusting to a fault, agrees and sends the Baudelaires to their room. The next morning, the children wake up to a chilling silence. They call out for Uncle Monty but receive no response. Their worst fears are realized when they find him dead, apparently bitten by the deadly viper. The police and Mr. Poe arrive to investigate, and Stefano seizes the opportunity to blame the viper for Uncle Monty's death. The Baudelaires, however, know the truth. They remember Uncle Monty's assurance that the viper is harmless and are convinced that Stefano is responsible for his death. Their suspicions are confirmed when Sonny begins playing with the viper, proving that it poses no threat. This revelation exposes Stefano's lies, and he flees the scene, leaving the Baudelaires once again in the clutches of misfortune. After the tragic death of Uncle Monty, Mr. Poe takes the Baudelaire children to their next guardian, Aunt Josephine, who lives in a precarious house perched on a cliff overlooking Lake Lachrymose. Aunt Josephine is a peculiar woman, deeply affected by her thanatophobia, an intense fear of death, which manifests in her extreme caution about everyday activities. She refuses to use the stove, fearing it might burst into flames, and serves the children cold soup instead. Her fear extends to nearly everything, from doorknobs, which she believes might break off and cause injury, to the telephone, which she thinks might electrocute her. Despite her quirks, Aunt Josephine is kind-hearted and welcomes the children into her home. As the children settle in, Aunt Josephine shows them old photographs of her adventurous past, including images of her late husband, Ike. The children are amazed to see how bold and fearless she once was, a stark contrast to the timid woman she has become. Among the photos, Violet discovers a picture of Aunt Josephine with her parents and Uncle Monty, revealing a deeper connection between their guardians and their family. When the children ask about the photo, Aunt Josephine quickly snatches it away, uncomfortable with how she looks in the image, and changes the subject. She takes them to her library, where she shows them the view of Lake Lachrymose and recounts the tragic story of her husband's death. Ike was eaten by the lake's infamous piranhas, a traumatic event that has left her paralyzed by fear. The children, realizing that Aunt Josephine's phobias are preventing her from living a full life, decide to help her overcome her fears. They take her to the supermarket, hoping to ease her into facing the world again. However, Aunt Josephine's anxieties persist, as she worries that the fruits and vegetables might be poisoned. While at the supermarket, the children encounter Count Olaf, who has once again disguised himself, this time as Captain Sham. The children immediately recognize him and try to warn Aunt Josephine, but she dismisses their concerns, charmed by Captain Sham's friendly demeanor. Klaus, in a desperate attempt to expose Olaf, pushes him over, only to discover that Captain Sham's peg leg appears to be real. This revelation shocks the children, but they remain convinced that Captain Sham is Count Olaf in disguise. Aunt Josephine, now smitten with Captain Sham, invites him to dinner as an apology for Klaus's behavior. The children are horrified but powerless to stop her. That evening, after returning home, they find the house in disarray and Aunt Josephine missing. A broken window suggests she may have fallen into the lake, but Klaus discovers a note left behind. The note, written in poor grammar, appears to be a suicide letter, stating that Aunt Josephine has grown tired of life and has decided to join her late husband in the lake. She leaves the children in the care of Captain Sham. However, Klaus, with his keen eye for detail, realizes that the grammatical errors in the note are actually a coded message. After deciphering it, the children learn that Aunt Josephine is alive and hiding in Curdled Cave, a location on the other side of the lake. Before they can act, the house begins to collapse, its foundation weakened by the cliff's erosion. The children narrowly escape as the entire structure tumbles into Lake Lachrymose. Determined to rescue Aunt Josephine, they borrow a boat and sail across the treacherous lake to Curdled Cave. When they arrive, they call out for her, and she emerges, relieved to see them. She explains that Captain Sham forced her to write the note and threatened her life. The children, now reunited with Aunt Josephine, prepare to return to town. As they sail back, the piranhas begin to swarm their boat, drawn by the movement in the water. Panicking, the children spot another boat in the distance and call for help. To their dismay, the boat is piloted by Count Olaf, still in his Captain Sham disguise. With no other option, the children climb aboard his boat, but as Aunt Josephine attempts to join them, Olaf coldly leaves her behind. The piranhas attack, and Aunt Josephine is tragically devoured, leaving the children devastated and once again at the mercy of Count Olaf. Suddenly, they're approached by Mr. Poe and a constable. Count Olaf, ever the manipulator, spins a tale of heroism, claiming he saved the children from the piranhas. Mr. Poe, oblivious as always, praises Olaf and places the children under his care. Olaf, now one step closer to his goal, learns from Mr. Poe that the only way he can access the Baudelaire fortune is if the children marry. Later, Olaf invites the entire town to witness the play, warning the children that if they interfere, he will harm Sonny. With no other choice, Violet agrees to play her part, while Klaus sneaks off to rescue Sonny. During the performance, Violet is walked down the aisle and made to recite false vows. Meanwhile, Klaus gets on the tower and looks around for a key to free Sonny out the cage. Olaf signs the marriage certificate and forces Violet to sign too. Klaus uses the huge magnifying glass to set fire to the marriage certificate, and destroys the legal document. The townspeople realize what Olaf was trying to do and arrests him, sentencing him to prison. A few days later, Mr. Poe finally begins to realize his mistakes and apologizes to the children for not believing them. He suggests they visit their old family home, now a charred ruin, to find closure. As they walk through the remains of their former life, the children are overwhelmed by memories of their parents. They discover a letter that was never delivered, written by their parents, expressing their love and encouraging the children to carry on their legacy. Along with the letter, they find a spyglass, a gift from their parents, symbolizing their enduring connection and the hope that the children will continue to seek the truth and persevere through adversity.